So now that we've discussed the majority of the foundation, let's tackle our first mental process. So the first mental process, or the first cognitive mental process that we'll focus on is we'll discuss the distinction between perception and sensation, and then this will lead us to Gestalt psychology. So what does it mean when you say sensation? So before we can define sensation, it's important for us to define what stimulus is. So stimulus is a type of energy that can be perceived by our senses, right? And then sensation refers to the actual process by which stimulus is detected by our sense organs, right? And so then what is perception? So perception refers to the active process of interpreting sensations, usually by the brain. Perception has three main steps. So we have 1, selection, and then 2, we have organization, and then 3, we have interpretation. So selection refers to the idea of selecting stimuli, because on a daily basis you receive a lot of stimuli from different sense organs, and so it's your brain's responsibility to select what it thinks is necessary, right? And second one is organization. Organization means the stimuli will be collected, right, and organized in preparation for interpretation. And then interpretation, you assign meaning to that particular stimuli. So that's what perception generally means. So one thing you need to know is that when you talk about sensation, mostly are referring to your sense organs, because your sense organs are the ones that produce sensation. So which senses are we talking about? So generally we're taught that we have 5 senses. However, you'll be able to see that depending on how you want to look at it, you can even have as many as 10 senses, right? So however, for the purpose of this discussion, we'll only discuss 7. So the first sense is the sense of sight, vision. We also have the sense of hearing, we have the sense of touch, we have the sense of smell, we have the sense of taste, we have the vestibular sense, and then we have the kinesthetic sense. I'm sure you know all these senses. And then later you can also have extended senses, such as nociception, such as thermoception, such as your organic sense. All these are senses. So now, when you're talking about perception, there are certain terminologies that you need to be able to know. So the first one is called threshold. Second one, attention. The third one, sensory adaptation. We also have organization, interpretation, and selection. I've already discussed the last 3, which are organization, interpretation, and selection. And then now I'll dive into the first 3 here. So these 3 are threshold, attention, and sensory adaptation. So what does it mean when you say threshold? So threshold can be of 2 types, right? We can have absolute threshold and difference threshold. So absolute threshold describes the minimum amount of stimulation that is required before you can experience sensation, or before a sensory experience. And then difference threshold is a bit different. So it refers to the minimum amount of energy that is required for you to detect the difference between 2 stimuli, right? Let me give you an analogy. So suppose you held up your hand, or let's say both of your hands, and then let's say I gave you a weight on your right hand, and then this weight was let me say 2 kgs, right? And then I gave you a similar weight on your left hand, and then I asked you to close your eyes and tell me if you're able to detect if there's a difference between the 2 weights. Most likely you will say they are the same, right? And then suppose I added 0.2 grams to one of the weights, let me say the left weight. Would you be able to detect the difference? Most likely you wouldn't. And so the minimum amount of change that I need to make in order for you to perceive a difference, that's what we're calling the difference threshold. So take note, it's sometimes called the just noticeable difference. It's sometimes called the just noticeable difference. And so you'll be able to see that there's also a law called Weber's law that is related to the just noticeable difference. And so Weber's law tells us that the more the intensity, right, the more the intensity of the stimulus, the harder it is for you to notice the difference, or the more difficult it is for you to tell the difference between two stimuli. And then you'll be able to see this even in a let me give an analogy of volume and a car. So suppose the volume was really high, right? If I changed the volume between, let's say I dropped the volume by 5 units, it would be very difficult for you to notice that difference if the volume was very high. But if the volume was quite low, changing 5 units is something that the human ear can pick up. And so that's the major idea between the two, absolute threshold and difference threshold. And then I'll make another video explaining this more. The next part we need to talk about is attention. So attention refers to concentrating or focusing on one aspect at a time. And so there can be many variations to attention. We can have sustained attention. We can also have divided attention, right? And there are many aspects that contribute to your attention. And so these aspects will involve things like interest, motivation, expectation, whether you are fatigued, or even the time of the day. And then there are also external factors that affect attention, like the size of the thing you're concentrating on, or the intensity of the thing you're concentrating on, or even the concept of repetition. And so that will mark the end of this video.